Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Jeff Sigel. He's a strategy, business intelligence, and marketing leader with 20 years of experience across the food, manufacturing, grocery, retail, and restaurant industries. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
You are welcome to the show. You are welcome to India, Jeff. You are welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe, a lot of businesses across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk about. We'll be talking about strategy and action alignment in business. So you talk about putting strategy into action in business. So help us understand about, about what is this strategy and action alignment in business all about, so that from especially from a small business point of view, people understand this and understand it better so that they can implement it.
Sure. So in my experience, so many times businesses will come up with a strategy on paper, or more likely these days in PowerPoint, and that's where it stays. It gets stuck there. And so the key, the idea of putting strategy into action is to try and understand what are the steps that you need to really take in order to make sure that that doesn't happen, that you actually get action. And so I come from most recently from the restaurant industry. If I come up with a strategy, but somehow that doesn't make it all the way down to the servers and the restaurant or the cooks and so forth, you end up with something that doesn't really look like what was intended. So I think there's a couple of pieces that I'm sure we'll talk about that really go towards that. But that's really what I'm talking about when I talk about putting strategy into action.
Right, Jeff. So to understand from you in terms of, when some strategy has been made by a business, it's been made by after a lot of thought, a lot of understanding about the things that they want to actually implement. So why don't they implement it? What's the challenge there?
Yeah, so I think a lot of times, I think there are really 5 pieces of the puzzle that need to come together for a strategy to really be activated. The first one, of course, is what you just said. You have to have a strategy. You have to have a plan, an objective. You need to have, sort of key results that you are aiming for. So that's point number 1. Point number 2 is really about communication. And this is about not just how you communicate your brand to your customers, but how you communicate your brand to the people that are delivering your brand every day, your employees. I used to say to my team that we need to inspire our employees to deliver the experience that we promise to our guests. So that's point number 2. Point number 3 is really about feedback mechanisms. This is the data and the analytics. You need to make sure that there's a constant conversation basically going on where information is bubbling up from your employees, who really are the people that have the most visibility to what's going on the ground, all the way up to the folks that are creating strategy at the top. And then the right information is going back down from the top to the employees so that they can make the right decisions at the right times. And then the next piece is really about sort of having the right, really understanding how do you operationalize your strategy? How do you turn a strategic idea into behaviors? So again, I'll use the restaurant industry. In my last company, we were trying to understand, or trying to make sure that our employees were taking care of the guests. Sometimes the way to get a server to take care of the guests is not to necessarily tell them, take care of the guests. Definitely should tell them that, but also to tell them, hey, make sure that their glasses are refilled, so that you're getting back to the table, that you're having this conversation with the guests, so that if, say, somebody forgot the ketchup for the French fries, that you can fix that. And then the last piece, I think, is really about culture. You have to have a mindset that recognizes that strategy isn't enough and that you need to do all of these things. Otherwise, what happens is the strategy sort of gets put again on a PowerPoint, and then it sits on the computer somewhere and it gets lost.
Right, Jeff. So in terms of the industries, is this strategy into action part limited to only some industries, or it is implemented across all industries? Also, is there some sort of a data, some sort of an understanding that in one particular industry or several industries there is this lack of strategy into action, and other industries are able to put it, they're just going to swing into action as soon as the strategy is made? Yeah, any understanding on that?
Yeah, so let me touch on your first question first, which is I think this is something that is true regardless of what industry you're in. It just happens in different forms. Certainly in sort of service industries like restaurant, retail, it's really important because you have often thousands of people who are delivering on a brand and a product every single day who need to understand what they need to do. That doesn't necessarily mean to understand every element of the strategy, but they need to understand what their purpose is and their role is within that strategy. But I think that's still true for industry, whether you're a manufacturing industry, software development, whatever it is, you still need everybody to understand what their role is in delivering the strategy. And so sometimes the strategy isn't coming to life because, say, the folks in IT don't understand that the data that they are working on is needed by someone else in the organization. So how do you make sure there's that conversation between them? As far as your question about data, I don't know if I have any. I don't know of any data that would say that this is happening in any particular industry more than any other. But in my experience, I've seen it across industries, and so I suspect it's fairly prevalent.
Right, right, Jeff. So coming back to my earlier question, in terms of challenges uh, to strategy implementation, what is there some mental block with some companies that your strategy continues to be on your computer, and you are not able to? Or is it some mental block? Is it some other reason? Also, once you answer, then I'll ask another question
Yeah,
about
sure.
how to make the best strategy.
Sure. So I would say I think the source of this problem actually comes from something that's it's a really interesting sort of thing. As corporations have developed over time, they've had to specialize, right? I mean, you don't want the people who are, the waiters in the restaurant also doing the accounting, and also, it's just not a very that would not be a very a good model for delivering on the business. And so the result of that is you've created these, specializations. You've got marketing, you've got finance, you've got operations, you've got all these folks doing these things, which naturally creates silos. And so the natural so we need these silos to be specialized so that they can do the work as best as possible. But at the same time, we need those silos to actually talk to each other so that they coordinate their work. And so that's where I think the problem actually comes in, is we get these very, very specialized groups and silos within the business, but the coordination isn't happening. So I think, to your question about what's the block, I think it's that you have to recognize that there's a need to coordinate the activities, not just say to people, hey, go do this work and hope that it all coordinates naturally. It has to be a thoughtful process.
Right. So that's a big role for a leader, for a founder, especially small
Absolutely.
organizations, or even larger organizations. In a time like today's, when we can talk to a document, why not employees from different silos talk to them one another better? Do you think with more technology this is becoming an hindrance, or this is going to help everyone uh, take the strategy further into action much more quickly? How do you see that? Even in a restaurant business, how do you see, is it working faster? This whole technology business is bringing more optimization, or is it again back into the silo problem that is there?
Yeah, it's a really great question, and I think that what we're seeing now is going to, in terms of technology, is going to lead to some really interesting solutions. But I'll just give an example. The other day, I was at a restaurant show, and I was talking to a guy that is working on a restaurant point of sale system. And one of the things that's part of that system is you give tablets to the server. And so what we were talking about is, the server's walking around with a tablet to put the order in. Well, one of the things you could do is you could actually prompt the server to say, hey, uh, nobody's been to table 17 in the last 10 minutes. Maybe you should go over there and check and make sure they're okay. Or, hey, why don't you ask this table if they want a drink? Or even better, if we know information about those folks from, say, a loyalty program, like, hey, I know that the last time these, the computer knows, if the last time these people came in, they ended up buying a second beer, it might say, hey, these people are likely to buy a second beer. Let's see if we can, get another sale out of them. And so I think there's incredible opportunities to really leverage technology, by the way, that has some of which has existed for a decade, to better coordinate. But again, it's got to be thoughtful, right? You can't just throw information out there at people. The thing that I've also seen is that sometimes we throw so much information that isn't really curated at people that they kind of just give up on it. So this might happen again. I'll keep using these restaurant examples, but this might happen if I give the general manager of the restaurant every piece of information about everything that was sold last week. He's just gonna, or she is just going to give up and stop looking at the data. Whereas if I say to that person, hey, you really need to focus on food waste, around, I don't know, whatever. And the restaurant I was working was pancakes, around pancakes, then he knows what to focus on. So I got to really curate the information and really be thoughtful about it. So I think, tools at the end of the day are tools. And we can give people tools, but we have to make sure that we give them the right training to use those tools, and we give them the curated information so they don't sort of end up being lost.
Right, Jeff. So, in terms of the leader, the owner,
Yeah.
what is their role here? They also have to make sure that things are better. Employees are also in a good way. Nowadays, there is this whole challenge of great resignation and all those. So, you need to take care of the employees also, and also make sure that the strategy is put into action. So, what is the role of the managers also here? How do you bring those two segments together so
Yeah.
that you can bring that ideal, idle ideas to life and into action?
And I think what you're asking is incredibly important. That ultimately, there's one person in the organization who cares about the entire strategy, right? Maybe two. Maybe there's a strategy guy like I was, but really, it's the CEO, right? The CEO is the person that has to really be thinking about how are all of the different functions working together. And I think in some ways, it's this sort of interesting challenge, I think, where the CEO has to drive that interest in breaking down those silos, that interest in having the conversation by basically saying, this is what's important to me. Because the people that are directly below the CEO, the C-suite or whatever, they're like everyone else. They want to please their boss and so forth. And if the boss doesn't care about siloing and basically just says, just go do your thing, everybody will just do their thing. But if the boss is really, really focused on that, that's what you will get. You will get people that focus on how do we work together? How do we collaborate? How do we make sure all of these pieces align? And what's I think that obviously plays out differently in, say, a big company, where that it's obviously very important, at a smaller company or a founder-led company, because often founder-led companies find themselves in this position where the founder is sort of like, everybody's an extension of the founder, right? They're just sort of doing what the founder wants, and it works well. And at some point, the organization becomes too big for that dynamic to work anymore. And that's the point where it's really important for that leader to understand, how am I going to get everybody to work together on and work towards a common cause when I can't direct all the pieces?
Right, Jeff. Now, let's look at the customer part here in your restaurant business. With
Yep.
all the, technology coming in, with the strategies coming in, when is actually the good customer experience not about a great order from him, but also about his experience? Where does this strategy actually take care of that part of customer experience, the human part of that whole experience? Even for other industries,
Yeah.
when we talk about all the strategies, with the already difficulties for the customers in different industries everywhere, how do we ensure that every strategy that you put onto the ground does not forget about the customer for whom it is all meant to be? Help
Yeah.
us understand both from both sides, other industries as well as the restaurant industry, which is also
Sure.
going through a great change.
Sure. I think, for the first thing I always go to, whether it's working with a restaurant company or a manufacturing company, or frankly, I had been working recently with a data analytics company, is you really have to understand your customer's journey, right? What is it that they are experiencing today when they interact with your business? And what do you want them to experience? Again, it's, if they're going into the restaurant and it's an extremely long wait and it takes a long time to get a table, and then once they sit down, nobody comes and stops by and asks what they want to drink, and it just takes a really long time. You really, to your point, you really start to lose that customer. They're thinking, why am I going to invest my time and money into this experience? But this is equally true in in dealing with, say, a client of a data analytics company who has to really understand, hey, I need this information is really hard for me to get in my company now. I need somebody who can partner with me, that's going to actually take the time to understand what my problem is going to help me solve that problem, and knows how I'm using the data and how I'm accessing it, what tools I'm using, all those kinds of things. And so really understanding what your customer's journey is I think the first key to making sure that customer has a great experience. And then defining what you want that journey to be is the second piece of the puzzle. That's part of the strategy. The strategy can't just be, we're going to grow, revenue, right? It has to actually be, we're going to grow revenue by doing X, Y, and Z, making sure that our customer or our guest has the right experience. And then the next piece, though, is probably the most important piece. And I said this earlier, is this idea that we have to inspire our employees to deliver the experience that we promise to our guests. In the end of the day, the most important thing is that we deliver as business people, that we deliver on what we promised, right? That's, if you need to deliver on expectations or above expectations. When you don't deliver on expectations is when you lose your customer. They just sort of baffled, why did I pay my money for this thing that wasn't what I wanted? And so what becomes incredibly important then is training. Define the role of what you want each person in the company to be doing, train them to do it, and then importantly, let them do their job. And then if something goes wrong, coach them to learn. I think it's also important that the employees feel like they can do things, they can make mistakes from time to time, but then they're going to get coached to learn how to fix those mistakes and so forth. But that piece of training your employees to deliver what was promised, I think is really essential to making sure that strategy happens.
Absolutely. There is much to learn about all these things, and there is so much to learn about the customer, which is in this whole thing of upselling and everything else,
Yeah.
is slightly getting lost behind. So all that strategy and action must refocus back onto the customer. Be that as it may, a lot of people who would like to understand more about these things, more about you, want to engage with you professionally, what is the best way for them to do so, Jeff?
Sure. So a couple of things. One is my website, which is proprioceptive.io. Or they can reach me at jeff.sigel@proprioceptive.io. But definitely reach out if people have questions, or if I can be of help.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Great. Thank you.